Hey folks, this is Dr. Emily Scherning with AR here with an up-to-date climate outlook for all of our friends in New Hampshire. This is a good one. Y'all been flying under the radar. Here's the resources I'm going to use for this outlook. If you want to follow along with me, go to the resources tab on my website, www.americanresiliency.org. You're going to be able to get a link to our original visualizations, to the NOAA Sea Level Rise Viewer, and to the NCA5 report, which is our primary source of data. The data sets from the NCA5 power our original visualizations, and this is also where you'll be able to find our figures. Go to the chapters tab on their website, go to all figures. One of the things that you might like about using our visualizations is that it presents a lot of information between 1.5C, which is where we are now. I recommend the Copernicus Institute for up-to-date current climate information. They've been tracking the recent climate anomalies, which you can see here in this sea surface temperature picture, where we're way above where we were before 2023, but not currently shooting directly into the sun, starting to come in maybe on a semi-stable 1.5C place. So we just came through a big jump. We're not where we expected to be in climate. We used to think that 2C was something coming up towards like 2050. Now many people are saying that 2C is likely to hit by 2030. So getting ready, building resilience for 2C is important. And if you look at some of our visualizations just side by side, the difference between 1.5C where we are now and 2C where we're going is big. So it's important to build resilience today and to become aware of what's coming. Please remember, I want you to be doing your own research. I want you to be able to confirm everything I report without too much work on your end. And I hope that seeing me use some of these tools and figures will help you feel like you can check out for your community, for your home. If you feel like you need help, get in touch with me. I'll help you. At American Resiliency, we use the 5th National Climate Assessment data and figures because they represent the highest consensus climate science available. Your tax dollars paid for the development and review of that information, and you deserve access. But as a matter of congressional mandate, there's no direct federal funding for communication to the public about the National Climate Assessment. That's why I founded American Resiliency. We're the only nonprofit focused on communicating this important information to the public, and we run on your donations. Checking out the heat difference in terms of wet bulb risk, your deadly killing type heat. For New Hampshire, the difference between 1.5C and 2C in terms of dangerous heat is small. You look great, New Hampshire. If you've been feeling fairly comfortable there this summer, you should feel some confidence that you're going to be able to continue to feel good up to 2C. Grafton County, I see as the notable difference here. Let's drill down a little bit. Let's see what's going on with heat increase for New Hampshire. We can do that in our hot days tool, which shows the total number of days over 95 projected to be added to your hot season at 2C. Grafton County, it looks like your increase in wet bulb risk is not coming from that. We must be looking at some change threshold in nighttime lows. We'll get to that in a minute. We can see that the total additional days over 95 expected for New Hampshire is fantastic. We're looking at less than 1 up on the border, down by the water, maybe 5 additional days over 95. If we look at coastal heat increases along the Northeast, that's looking great. Let's get more information. We're going to do that in figure 2.11 from the NCA5, changes in hot and cold extremes. You can see at a glance your unimpressive hot days. You also look good for warm nights. This is surprisingly great. Look at how warm it's getting by the ocean down in Massachusetts. You're looking at least a shade darker than in New Hampshire. If you look down by New York City, big heat island there, big increase in nighttime warming. You're looking at just maybe like an additional week of nights over 70 by the water, paired up probably with that relatively short increase in your hot season duration. You're looking at a challenging week if you're by the water in New Hampshire. Otherwise, very low levels of change. I know that your July highs are not like already in the 90s, so even seeing in 1 additional day over 95 does represent a change in character for the region. But compared to the national picture heat outlook, you're looking fantastic. I'm so impressed by this mild level of summer change right by the coast. I want to get right to sea level rise. Let's check it out. All right, here we are in the NOAA Sea Level Rise Viewer. This is a powerful tool. You can get address level information, so if you live anywhere near the coast, this is going to be a good one for you. Here we are in the New Hampshire coast. Let's zoom in a little bit, focusing on Hampton. This is a beautiful area, such a large, well cared for conservation area. And we can see that at 3 feet of sea level rise, which is about where that's like gonna happen in this part of the East Coast. We can see marsh movement inland, and we can see changes where the salt marsh is becoming open water. And you can imagine that these areas will become more marshy that are right up on the water. But there's really quite good preservation of the harbor and of the outer keys, as well as the built environment. So I think we need to go past 3 feet of modeling. All the melt information, it's coming in way above historic modeling and expectations. I made a video about this a few weeks ago. If you search for Antarctica on my YouTube channel, you'll be able to see for yourself. I've got a lot of important primary sources put together there with the information coming out of Antarctica today. It's more reasonable now than it was even a couple of years ago to consider 10 feet of sea level rise. And at 10 feet, this is bad. I mean, here you lose the harbor, you have big changes, but look at Hampton. It's really a fairly small portion of the built environment that's impacted even at 10 feet. Pulling back to 3 and to today, you can identify the areas that are vulnerable, and you can identify that there is a strong core that will be untouched. In the town of Rye, we see the same thing. At 3 feet, we see definite migration of swamps and marshes, but really quite excellent outer harbor and key preservation. And at 10 foot, big changes. But you look so good at 3. You look so good at 3. And even at 10, you have so little alteration to the built environment that I'm going to say an unusual thing here. If I were in these places and I were a generational thinker all the way up to Little Harbor on the New Hampshire coast here, I might fight. I might fight this one. This is a small enough area, good enough preservation area, looking strong enough at 3 feet of sea level rise that I'd say this looks like an area with potential for localized seawalls. If you're a person who's interested in coasts, you might note that I rarely recommend a seawall type solution, even more rarely for the East Coast, because the damage along the coast is projected to be so widespread and severe. These little pockets, these lovely little harbors here in New Hampshire, if you're there, I'm sure you know they are unique. They could be a unique stronghold. I do think they look so good at 3. I do think this could be a place to make a stand. Now, up here by Portsmouth, up by the Maine border, at 3 feet of sea level rise, we can see that there's pretty big change pretty far inland when we're talking about these towns that follow the rivers up and downstream. At 3 feet, we do see impacts to those towns. And at 10 feet, of course, the impacts are more severe. I would check out down here. There's a couple of neighborhoods that are going to get hit really bad. But if we look at Portsmouth itself, we can see that even at 10 feet, although we can see some areas where retreat is necessary, your airport is looking good and most of your housing is looking good. You know, this is a special situation that we're seeing here with New Hampshire and sea level rise. I think that there are areas where defending against the sea is appropriate. I think there's areas where retreat against the sea is appropriate. But overall, your unique topography really is presenting you with a lot of advantages. And this is a surprise to me because things look so bad just south of you in Massachusetts, and they don't look great in Maine either. I think we see along the New Hampshire coast areas where we must accept change and retreat, except that some homes will be damaged. If you're in Exeter, check it out. There are a couple of neighborhoods that are getting whacked pretty hard. But even at 10 feet, this looks so much better than the damage that we see elsewhere in the region along the coasts. From these projections, I would say that this is not a state where sea level rise is likely to bankrupt the state, and it's a state where your access to the ocean looks like it could remain useful and positive. New Hampshire, you're surprising me. You look real strong. Let's see what's up next because you're checking out good on heat. You're checking out good on sea level rise. Let's move into looking at winter change. We'll do that back in figure 2.11 from the NCA 5, where we see that, your water looks so stable. Look down there. You can see these hot spots for cold loss in the winter in many places around the coast in the Northeast. You don't see any of that in New Hampshire. You see what is fairly standard for the region, about a 3-week loss of cold with that dark orange color. And then around Lake Winnipesaukee, you see just a couple of weeks less of 32 there. Lake Winnipesaukee looks like it's having a buffering impact. So that's duration. You're looking at about 3 weeks of cold loss throughout the state. If we want to talk about intensity of cold loss, we got to look at figure 11.3, which you can see is huge and you are small. So I'm going to pull some snips in just a second so that we can look at the projected changes to plant hardiness zones right in New Hampshire, which gives us a good proxy for the lift, the change in the winter lows. So here in the SNP, this is a big change. You're looking at least a 10-degree lift in your winter lows. Your winter is going to shift away from a distinctly aggressively cold winter that's going to feel very different in the north of the state. By the time we hit 2C, your winter across New Hampshire is going to feel more like winter was in various parts of Massachusetts back around like 2010. The southern half of the state, we're talking about the winter historically in eastern Massachusetts by the water, moving up into southern New Hampshire. That's a mild winter, a real shift away from the traditional deep 4-season winters that we're used to in New Hampshire. But the good news is that once we get up towards the White Mountain National Forest, that deep cold is better preserved. It's probably going to stay cold enough to continue to preserve some forest health in the White Mountain National Forest. That is really good news. Pair that up with the lack of big summer heat increases. That's wonderful to see. Really good forest outlook. We've moved into figure 210 from the NCA 5 now to look at your precipitation outlook. And let's zoom in here at 2C. We can see that New Hampshire's in an interesting place. You're in this band between 10%-ish more precipitation and 5%-ish more. Vermont, your neighborhood is so afflicted by flooding, we can see maybe you won't be getting quite as much water. Let's get more information on your potential for deluge type rains. I'm going to go to figure 2.12. So you can see that 2.12 is a big figure. It's a complicated figure. I am seeing some strong repeating signals for New Hampshire on this figure. I see a strong repeating pattern over Portsmouth actually, which stinks, and enough of a repeating pattern along the Merrimack River that I don't like it. Let's zoom in. Let's zoom in here on your total precipitation on like your heaviest days. You can see the pattern there really clearly over Portsmouth and along the Merrimack River watershed here. And this pattern directly striking by Portsmouth does repeat across figures. From the information we can take from figure 2.12, I would be concerned as we move towards 2C about increases in riverine flooding in the Merrimack watershed, both in southern New Hampshire and downstream. And I would be concerned about big freaking storms whacking Portsmouth. Along the New Hampshire-Maine border, I would definitely consider flooding risk as a big part of my resilience plan. And like I said in the Vermont video, also released today, I would not anticipate flood insurance continuing to be available with the way the home insurance market is changing now. Insurance companies are pulling out of states coast to coast. We've already seen insurance markets retreating due to flood risk in the Midwest, in the St. Louis area, in some parts of Iowa. I think it's worth keeping this in mind as you think about your future in New Hampshire, that we need to take flood risk really seriously as a key resilience step in this state, and that this is an important time for cities to invest in flood-related infrastructure. Overall, New Hampshire, I have to say, I think you look awesome. Your national forest looks like it could stay healthy. Your coastline is interesting. You've got potential for appropriate defense and retreat that could maintain your relationship to the ocean really well. Really quite nice potential. Your big challenge, you got to think about flooding. Building resilience against flooding is going to be critical for your future, especially in southern New Hampshire. If you're considering moving to this area, you want to make sure you buy way out of the floodplain. You don't want to ever buy or rent a place to live that has ever flooded in these areas. Not along the border with Maine, not in the Merrimack watershed. And if you're in or around Portsmouth, anticipate storms that will bring flooding potential. Make sure to also check out your address in that sea level rise tool and see if you're in a retreat area or an area where building resilience seems like a good strategy. There's a couple of problems heading towards you, New Hampshire. You got a couple of too much water problems between the rains and the sea level rise. Living things tend to do better with too much water problems than with too little water problems, and your mild summer outlook is very attractive. I think you have excellent potential to build resilience in this state, a good future to build here. New Hampshire, let's get ready. Folks, thanks for watching, and I want to thank everyone in the AR community for your contributions that are keeping this nonprofit going. If you want to donate, there's a link on the About page of our YouTube channel or on the top bar of our website, www.americanresiliency.org. I'm very grateful to our donors, to our volunteers, to everyone spreading the word online, and especially to everyone doing the work on the ground. Thanks for getting ready with me, and talk with you again soon.